What's up, yo? Welcome to the Young Legends podcast, where we teach you the cheat codes of the game of life. I'm your host, Caption, aka Caption Red, and I'm super excited about today's interview. Author of New York Times best-selling book, Mr. Dave Evans. Mr. Evans, I actually wrote something that I would like to share before we get rolling into this. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
All right. Here we go. A man named Dave Evans shared his many gifts. He helped us advance by flipping the script, planted seeds into Apple with their first mouse ever made, co-founded EA so he stayed in the game. With offers of riches, chose family instead, consulted the tech world, gave companies legs. But now on a mission to change many lives, he helps us build forward a life by design. Through programs and labs and books that he's written that help you create a life that's now hidden. So open your mind to his thoughts and insights and start where you are in designing your life.
Caption, you're killing me there. Okay, I have never had a hip hop intro before, and so you're breaking new ground this morning. This is terrific.
Yes, hey, yes, sir. I am super excited about this interview, and I couldn't give you one of those ordinary pre-recorded. Hey, he wrote this book. He's done.
Yeah, I hate that stuff,
amazing...
frankly. Yeah.
so
cool.
Something.
You got to send me that.
Will do. Absolutely. So, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing fine. Glad to be here. Finally, as you know, as the audience may not know, it's our third attempt at making this thing work. So hopefully we'll actually get through it.
Third time is the charm. Here we are. It's going to be glorious. It's going to be glorious. So, the way I like to start my interviews, as you know, because we've tried this a couple of times, is I like to start with a story from your life, fun story, an interesting story, a cool story, something along those lines. So what story would you like to share with us today?
A different one. It's sort of a small anecdote, but literally I was walking the dogs last night. I live at the beach. I literally live on Monterey Bay in Santa Cruz, California. So I'm looking at the Pacific Ocean as we speak. So there's this, about 2 mile long walk along the cliff right near where I live. And the dogs and I walk the cliffs very often, particularly in the evening as we're sort of heading towards sundown. And I'm walking along, and I get a text. And I get a text from John Kleiman, who actually lives in Maine on the east coast of the U.S. and used to be one of the fellows, one of the junior employees of the Life Design Lab years ago. And he goes, "Hey, the old fellows are having a reunion. Kathy got us together. Do you want to make a surprise appearance?" So I electronically snuck in and suddenly made an appearance. There are 8 people on this call, all of whom used to work for me. And they've all, the Life Design Lab is 15 years in now. This is our 15th year of operation. And this included, Eugene and Kyle, the very first 2 fellows who ever worked with me and Bill back in, this is like 2010. So these people I've known for a dozen years. And I briefly had a great time talking about these 8 people who are old, dear colleagues of mine, all of whom, of course, have had continuing life design experiences and radical changes. One of them just got married. One of them just had a kid, this kind of stuff. And it's just a reminder that it's absolutely always about the people. I was so happy to see. I love these guys. I really love them. And if the last 2 years, especially, as we've all been going through all kinds of difficulties, has taught us anything, at the end of the day, it's about the people.
Absolutely. And, everything that you've done is, designed around the people. And
yeah, it is.
I love the story, y'all connecting after all these years and seeing where everybody's life has been, gone in the past 15 years. That's great. Yeah. So, I've read your book. I've listened to your book. I've reread your book. And I love everything that you have to share in there. And you talk about common dysfunctional beliefs.
Yeah.
That is a running theme that is peppered throughout the book. And there are a lot of them. And so I was wondering if you would share with us a common dysfunctional belief that y'all have seen as you have helped people to design their lives.
Yeah, and I think probably, sort of 2 come to mind, really. Probably the most common one we run into nowadays is follow your passion. We're sort of getting a reputation as the anti-passion guys, which is unfair. I'm a pretty passionate person. We're very pro-passion. We're just not in favor of what we think is the dysfunctional belief that your life design or your life pathway begins with the very first critical question being to answer, what's your passion? What's your passion caption? And the reason that's a dysfunctional belief is research shows if you ask a whole bunch of people, hey, what's your passion? 8 out of 10 of those people will either say, gosh, Dave, I don't know. I haven't found my passion yet. Or, hey, I got a couple. Which one did you want to hear about first? Now, if you're either the I haven't found it or I've got a pile of them person, either of those people, as different as they are, don't have the one single organizing strategic passion that is the centerpiece of their life that makes everything make sense. Like, I'm going to go off and do, documentary films about, salamanders. That's my passion, And so an awful lot of lives right now are being at least stressed, if not frankly crushed, by the worry that I haven't found my passion, so I can't possibly have a good life. The majority of people who find a passionate life, actually the passion is the outcome of the well-lived life. They find their way toward a passion. Passion's their result, not the starting place. So the dysfunctional part of that find your passion or follow your passion idea is what its belief system is. Big questions have belief systems. And before you empower a question or a statement to be a life-guiding or particularly a life-judging question, like, have you found your passion? No. Oh, that's so sad. I've just judged your life as being worthless. That's a terrible thing to do. Before you empower a question that way, double-check its belief system and make sure you agree with that belief system, because what's your passion as the starting place of life believes is, number one, everybody has a passion. Number two, everybody can find it. Number three, you will discover it at the beginning of the journey of life. Number four, the world will let you do it. And number five, you can make a living at it. All 5 of those are untrue. All 5. Not one of those is actually true for everybody all the time. So before you give a question lots of power over your life, be sure you double check its belief system. So probably my favorite dysfunctional belief is, what's your passion?
Absolutely. And did you say there was a second one that you?
Oh, the second I was thinking about it this week before our call was coming up. This whole idea about, it's all design thinking based, and we talk about different kinds of thinking. And I'll sort of jump to the chase here. We might come back to design thinking a little later, but design thinking differs from engineering thinking, business thinking, research thinking, bureaucratic thinking. There are lots of ways to think in the world. And frankly, I think going all the way back over 150 years to the Industrial Revolution and the first transcontinental railroad in North America, that we have been experiencing technologically transformed lives for so long. And there's been an engineered solution to so many problems. We can fix it. We can solve it. We can find a way to do the right thing. Very often by applying technology. That's what engineers do. They take science and technology and they apply it to some kind of a solution. And so, everybody sort of starts thinking, I can solve anything. I can solve my life. I can get me right. And that engineering way of thinking is not true for some of the most important problems in the world, like how to live your life. And so design thinking, which incrementally builds our way forward empirically by trying stuff, knowing that there is no one right answer. There's just maybe a slightly better solution, and we're going to do a better one tomorrow. That approach to thinking is a very, very different way. And again, a lot of people are judging their lives. Like, are you sure this is it? Are you doing the right thing? Is this the best possible version of you? This podcast thing, are you sure this is really the best you? Are you sure you should be writing books instead of doing a video cast?
No.
Is this really it? Have you solved it? That kind of question, that kind of worry comes from what I would call engineering thinking, not design thinking. And if we want to be designers, life designers, it's a way of thinking about the world.
Right, absolutely. And I've actually asked myself that question recently, and yeah.
And by the way, the answer to the question, is this absolutely the best possible thing you could be doing, is no. There is no such thing as the best possible thing you could be doing. We keep saying there's more aliveness in every one of us than one lifetime will permit you to live out. Again, not to be super heavy, but as you know, 10 months ago, my wife died. My wife beat cancer 20 years ago. Then she recontracted a different version of it, a much more aggressive, nasty version of it about a year ago. And so, in March of 2020, we got a terminal diagnosis. And in December of last year, 10 months ago, almost to the day, she died. Right. And she died at 70. And it was what we called sad, not tragic. It was not tragic because, most of our bucket list things were checked off on some. But trust me, she left this world with a whole lot of things not done. A whole lot of versions of how she could express being Claudia into the world never experienced. That's the human condition. You're never going to get done. You're never going to get right. There isn't one perfect you. There isn't one right you. There are lots of good yous. So what we want to do is just keep evolving. And if we believe in growth, by the way, and you're going to get better, like, I am better. I'm 60. I'm better now than I was when I was 60. And at 60, I was better than I was at 35. So if you're going to get better, you're going to change. Then, of course, you can't be right, because right would mean you're done. Well, you're never done unless you don't believe in growth anymore. Then you've given up being a human being. So if you're going to be a growth-oriented person, and you recognize your life contains more capacity than your lifetime will ever allow you to express, then the best we can possibly hope for is to be doing, reasonably good things that look like they kind of make sense at the time, and then growing into the next thing we discover as we go along. That is as good as it gets. Perfect is crazy. There is no perfect.
Right. Yeah.
So you're
absolutely fine. Okay, good. Okay, I'm gonna breathe easy for the day based on that answer. Okay. So there is no perfect, but there is obviously better, right?
Yep.
And so
sure.
In the book,
yep,
you do talk a lot about prototyping. So
yes.
Can you talk about what is prototyping and why is it important?
Yeah, so prototyping is a big word. It's used lots of ways, and they're all valid. We have a very specific approach to what we mean by prototyping, so we should clarify that. And I'm, again, going to make a distinction between a design prototype and what I would call an engineering or a late-stage engineering prototype. And it all has to do with a question. Again, a prototype is a thing. It's a demonstration of some idea you have to go try it out and see how it goes. Now, if the question that your prototype is asking is, boy, I really hope this works. You mentioned in the rap, yes, I was the world's first mouse product manager back in 1979 and 80 at Apple with Steve Jobs, long time ago. And, we went through like 130 prototypes, but the last ones, which were just before we manufactured the first factory run, those prototypes like, okay, we want to make sure this one works. Does it work right? That's what that prototype's job is to be, because the next thing is going to be a product. Okay, that's not a design prototype. Early on, the prototype's job is to ask a question like, do people like this? Does this really work? Does it make your hand hurt? We're trying to learn our way forward because we know that we don't know what we're doing. So in your life, when you're prototyping your life, you're trying to come up with this thing called the future. And you can't know the future. You can't analyze the future. You can't think yourself to the future. You have to live into it. So a prototype gives you a chance to live into the future. Bill, my partner, loves to quote a guy named Gibson who says, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. And so what that means is there are people who are currently living lives that are closer to the kind of future you're imagining. So the prototype, which is to ask an interesting question, what would it be like to be a videocaster? What would it be for Bill and Dave? What would it be like to write a book? We'd never written a book in 2015. We'd done lots of things. We're, both very experienced guys, been in lots of industries, had, raised families, had children, built houses, built companies, never written a book. Had no idea what that was like. So rather than, well, I guess we'll just have to go write a book and see how it goes, you prototype it. And in life prototypes, they're very simple. They're one of two things, either an experience or a conversation. And the conversation is the get the story conversation. Hey, will you be my agent? That's a transactional conversation. That's not a life design conversation. A life design conversation is say, well, hey, Laura, you've written a couple of books. What was that like for you? How did you move from journalism into book authorship? What was the difference about that? And you go find an agent. Well, why do you do what you do? And how did you get that life? And what have you've worked with lots of authors. Tell me about different kinds of authors. You get these stories that allow you to sort of walk into these other people's lives, and you start learning what those things are all about. In science, because you're leading toward eventually is decision making. I want to make a decision about which way to go. And this has to do with surrogation versus analysis. Dan Gilbert at Harvard has done a bunch of research on this. And surrogation means I'm going to figure something out by, surrogately borrowing the lives of other people, as opposed to simply reading a lot of data on Google. And it turns out people who lean into surrogation, borrowing the experience of other people, make better decisions than the people who just do analysis. So prototyping is really a way of sneaking up on the future by having conversations and trial experiences of things you want to learn more about to see if you really want to go live that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna do a whole episode on informational interviewing, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's exactly what we mean. We call it life design prototype conversations. And the critical thing here is I'm just going to, comment on your coming podcast. First of all, it's terribly important. It is the single most important tool we teach. It's the far and away single most powerful tool. We had a student named Shu Chao. 3 years after graduation, she comes back, she goes, "Hey, I'm on campus. Can we get together and have a coffee or have a lunch?" I go, "Yeah, I'd love to see you." And she walks up to the table on the patio in front of the student union, and she sits down, and the first thing she goes is, "You have to tell them. You have to tell them." She's totally cranked up, And I kind of go, "Oh, okay, I'll tell them." "Tell them what?" She goes, "It's true. It's true." I go, "Okay, what? What's true?" And she goes, "The thing about talking to people, it's really important." And I went, "Yeah, I know. I'm so glad you can confirm that for me." So the information interview, but the critical thing about the information interview or the life design prototype conversation is that it is the narrative. You're getting the story. It is not a transactional conversation. You're not asking for money. You're not asking for a job. Sure. Because as soon as you make this a transaction where the person you're talking to thinks you want something from them, particularly if they think what you want is a job, then boom, you're now first of all, 9 times out of 10, that person doesn't have what they think you want. I can't give you a job. If I thought this morning what you wanted from me was a job, sorry, we have no openings. We're done. So first thing is 9 times out of 10, you're already over before you start. And then even if they do have what you think you want, you want money from them, or you want a job from them, you want a reference from them, they have it to give. Now I have to make a judgment as to whether or not you're worthy of it. Sure. So the brain you're getting in that person is a judging brain. Yes, no. Do I really want to refer, Caption Red to my friend or not? Is he cool enough? You don't want a judging brain to talk to. That's a very critical mindset. Probably leaning toward rejection. So it's like, "Hey, you're a really interesting person. Tell me your story. You and I both think you're fascinating. We have a common interest in you're the fascinating person. Why don't we talk about how fascinating you are? Would that work for you?" And most people kind of go, "Sure. My favorite topic is me and what I'm doing. Let's talk about me." Sure. I wouldn't say it quite that obviously, though pretty close, frankly. It works surprisingly well. So we'll leave this now and go back to the interview you had in mind. But information interviewing or life design prototype conversations are crucially important, and it's all about the story, not the transaction. And to get one, the crucial thing you need to bring to the table is authentic curiosity. Those things you want to hear about, those stories you're looking for, you actually have to want to hear them. You can't fake it. So if you aren't really curious about somebody, don't talk to them. Wait until you can generate some curiosity. Like, "No, I'd really love to hear Caption Red's story." If that's not true, don't bother the man.
Absolutely.
Okay. End of commercial.
Nice. It's a great commercial. Worth repeating. So, real quick, once you go through the informational interview, you're like, "Hey, this sounds like something I would love to do." Can you give us just a short example of someone who would go and prototype it after it sounds like a good idea?
Sure. So, first of all, this is a numbers game. I was just having this conversation with a young man the other day, and I said, "Look, you need to understand, because his long-term goal is to get a job. He wants to change. He's in the insurance world. He wants to change the category he's in. He's got some tough sledding in front of him, frankly, but I think it's doable." And I said, "It's probably going to take you 6 months to a year, and you probably need to have 50 to 75 conversations to pull this off." He's going, "Oh my God." I said, "Yeah, and frankly, that feels like it starts hard. But once you get going and you've talked to a number of people, the key thing you do at the end of one of these conversations is go, well, hey, Caption Red, this was really fascinating talking to you. I'd love to continue this kind of a conversation. Could you share with me possibly some names of other people, not unlike yourself, that also have interesting stories, and would you mind referring me to them? So the outcome of the information interview is a referral to 3 more of them. And if you do this right, if you get more than 1 referral per person, it gets geometric very quickly. And pretty quickly, you've got a wide network of people. So the first thing you're going for is 8 out of 10 jobs are found not on the internet, not listed that you can obviously apply to. They're word of mouth by people through referral. So what you're trying to do is penetrate the community of people in the domain of human activity and that's going on that you're trying to understand better. Like back in the day when we were trying to understand the book publishing world. I was trying to crack into the publishing world and know people in that world. This guy's trying to crack into sort of the state-of-the-art digital insurance company world. He's kind of in the old school federal government world, and he's trying to move over to this other world. He's got to go meet enough people there. Not that someone's going to nepotistically give him a job. It's just you have to be in the conversation. So thing one, what do? Is you keep going and have more conversations. And early on, in the early weeks of this process, it's going to be very tempting to think, I'm not getting anywhere. No one's offered me a job. Nothing's really happening. I'm just talking to lots of people and drinking lots of coffee. And that's exactly right. It takes a little while. But nonetheless, it will eventually generate opportunities. So what you do then, after you have these conversations, is now those are, again, of the 2 kinds of prototypes we want, a conversation or an experience, I want to upgrade to the second category and try to do some things. I want, well, gee, could I come and participate in a meeting? Could I, sit in on when you guys are doing this thing? Is there anything you need some help on? Now, first of all, in the business world, at least, in the organizational world, including nonprofits and government organizations, everybody who runs anything as small as a team of 3 people has a budget. And no one got all the budget for that fiscal year that they wanted. At the end of the year, there's the budgeting process, and you put in your request, and I want, $100,000 for my small team, or I want, $10 million for my group, or whatever it is, and then the whole financial process gets crunched and back it goes, and there's a couple of cycles, and then here's the final budget. And your final budget, the amount of money you're allowed to spend, is never the amount of money you first asked for. So what do? Well, that means every single person who has any budget at all, who's got the responsibility of overseeing spending money or using people's time, knows of a couple of things they would love to do, they can't afford to do. So if you're getting to know somebody in this information interviewing process, a question you can always say is, well, hey, if you had another 100,000, another 10%, budget to spend, or you had 1 or 2 more people you could add to your group, what would you do with them? Now, it's a very rare person who would say, oh, I have no idea. I'm overstaffed as it is. My people are bored. I don't know what to do. By the way, if you are talking to that person, move on quickly. They're not interesting. Because everybody wants to do something more. And then you start hearing about those more things, and some of those more things might be things you could actually do, or at least make a little progress on. Like, well, hey, that sounds pretty interesting to me too. Would you mind? I might be taking a look into that. Would you like to hear what I discover if I do some research on that? Oh, well, sure. Now that's a night job, and you're actually going to have to go spend some time and do some work. But frankly, one of the best ways to get involved in different kinds of work or a different way of living is just start doing it. Just start doing it for free. If you give yourself the job you want by doing it for free, somebody might come along and actually start paying you for it.
That's fantastic. That is great information.
We had quite a few students who literally, start doing the work, and then the company just kind of goes, well, now that I got used to, I really like this. I don't want you to stop doing this. I guess we're just going to have to hire you.
Wow, that's the backdoor trick of the century.
It is a trick, yeah. It doesn't always work, but it has on occasion actually succeeded.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many questions I want to ask you, but I want
to pick one and we'll keep going.
One at a time, right? Can you just talk about what the 5 mindsets are that you mentioned in the book?
Yeah, in fact, we added one in the 6th in the second book. So they are curiosity, radical collaboration, reframing, bias to action, mindfulness of process, and now also storytelling. And the centerpiece one is curiosity, for sure. And again, we talk about the five, actually 6 steps of the design process, and we talk about the 6 mindsets of a designer. So there's this process thing, which looks nice and linear, and it's never done linearly. And then there are the mindsets. And when we went to the task of writing the book, which is pretty different from the Stanford course. A course, a 10-week-long, 20-hour course with lots of people in the room talking to you is a very different experience than sitting down by yourself and reading a book cover to cover. So when we designed the book, we had to decide how to organize it, and we concluded that the mindsets were probably, for life design in particular, the really powerful tool. So that has been a centerpiece in the book. And curiosity is the first thing. And curiosity, the way I describe what curiosity really is, it's the pursuit of latent wonderfulness. Mm-hmm. A curious person kind of goes, ooh, what's going on over there? I bet something wonderful is happening over there. My metaphor is a rock in the garden. You go pick up a rock, in your yard and in a garden, and underneath the rock, what do you find? You find all these bugs. There's all these bugs crawling around underneath this rock, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Well, what do all these bugs know about this rock that you don't? I mean, like, this is the really cool rock in the yard. I mean, the bugs aren't over here. They're not over there. They found this rock. Like, this is the place I want to be. So, my belief about anything is, there are a bunch of bugs over there under that project or under that company or under that study group, and they're all working at something, and what do they know that keeps them interested that I don't? Rather than, oh, it's an insurance company, it's probably boring. If you expect something to be boring, you will not be disappointed. You will find it to be boring. If you expect something, I'm sure there's 10,000 people working in that company. There's got to be something interesting going on. Okay, you will go with that attitude. Your chance of finding something interesting goes way up. And by the way, your chance of those people wanting to talk to you goes way up. Like, hey, Caption Red, I bet doing what you're doing is really cool. Tell me more about it. It's like, you just sit there and talk into a microphone to, people on a screen. Why do you do that? If I ask you that question, like, well, get lost. So part of this curiosity thing is huge. If you have to pick one, that's the one. Then radical collaboration means not collaborating with radicals, though that might happen. It means broadly listening. It means radically wide, radically inclusive. The empathy step of design requires that you listen in before you ask the question, what are we going to do? You ask the question, what's going on? Just what's going on? So from radical collaboration, then you're going to go to reframing. If you have listened deeply into the situation in front of you, like, I think I might want to go do this, and now you go do a bunch of these prototype conversations, you're going to learn stuff you didn't know you didn't know. And you're probably going to be invited to reframe your point of view, reframe your position on what you think this experience is going to be like. Right? And life is full of that. Again, not to be melodramatic, but, because I had some time while my wife was battling her cancer before she died, we knew that, I'm getting ready to be a widow. So I spent a bunch of time with guys who had lost their wives. And one guy who had a long 9-year walk toward his wife's death. She was a counselor. She was actually a grief specialist. So she really knew what she was doing. And his counsel to me was, look, there's no way you can prepare for this. It's going to be so heavy. It's going to be so hard. Don't waste a minute of your time trying to figure out what you're going to do after your wife dies. Take whatever time you have and just throw it into enjoying one another, being with her. You got plenty of time to figure out what it means to live life without her. Don't waste your time. Because the experience, the reality of being on the other side of that experience is so radically different. There's no way you can prepare for it. And that was exactly true. That was exactly true. And so, the reframe was, and I'm now doing a lot of reframing, but it's reframing I can only do from this side of that experience. So reframe changes your mind about what life is like or what this aspect of life is like. And then mindfulness of process, like, take the steps one at a time. I've got a lot of questions to ask, he says. Well, okay, but mindfulness of process, interviews tend to be linear. Pick one, if you're not sure, give Dave 3 questions, let him pick one. But you got to do things in process. You got to be sensitive to what that process is, and then bias to action. Designers really are, we're behavioral engineers. We actually do things. We don't just think things up. We don't mostly, do equations. We do prototypes and activities. So when in doubt, go do. You don't think your way forward. You build your way forward. And then lastly, you tell the story. All that stuff's iterative. And in the process of life design, especially, what we're doing is I'm being empathetic about myself, trying to learn who I really am. I'm trying to be empathetic about the world I'm trying to engage with. So I'm trying to understand two things. If I'm doing that well, I'm growing and I'm learning. And so people go, hey, how's it going? And I go, well, here's what I'm learning. Here's the question I was just asking. I just came back from a 4-day sailing trip, from Santa Cruz down to San Diego. We sailed for 500 miles. I've been wanting to do a multi-day sailing trip overnight, nonstop on a boat, a day sailor, all for decades. Well, what did I learn? What's the story? What can you tell the story of what you're learning? If so, people say, hey, how's it going? You go, well, I stayed up all night and binge watched Game of Thrones all over again for the 9th time. Well, okay, a lot of people are saying that kind of thing. It's not that interesting. If you're saying, oh gosh, I just had my very first 4-day sailing experience and here's what I learned. That's the story you're telling. That's much more engaging. And what that does is it creates a conversation that invites more. Oh, really? Well, I know this guy that, he does multi-day motorcycle trips. You should talk to him. So if your story of your prototype evolution process is reflective and learning and thoughtful, and you've got some reframes. Josh, I reframed how I think about two kinds of sailing. Offshore sailing and day sailing, those are technical terms, are really different in ways I didn't understand. That's a reframe. I'm telling my story in a way that's pretty generative, and then the interesting people want to engage with you. And then all of life gets more interesting, because the truth is, life design isn't just about come up with the right solution to, my new lifestyle or my new job or what have you, and then I install it, and then we're good, we're done. That's a transactional way of thinking. Like, what do I do after I complete my life design project, right? Because you're not doing this. Well, you keep living the same way. You live in the designer mindset of being curious, talking to people, reframing, learning stuff, prototyping. That's kind of what we do.
Absolutely. And those are, you go by those guiding principles, and you'll find your way. Speaking of finding
it's kind of a way of being in the world,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and speaking of finding your way, the Good Time Journal, I think, was very helpful for me. So could you explain the Good Time Journal and how it's helped your students find their most meaningful work?
Sure. The Good Time Journal is a very, very simple tool. A lot of people don't actually have a good answer to the question, what do I really want to do? Or what really works for me? In fact, a lot of people's perception about what works well for them isn't very accurate. So I say, look, one of the first people you want to be empathetic to, and you want to just, observe is yourself. And so the Good Time Journal is a little form. It just has, little blanks, of paper where you jot at the end of each day, you jot down, what you did, the key things you did, and then you make notes about where were you engaged, what level of engagement you had with that activity, and how energized or de-energizing doing that activity was. And so if you're highly energized, then you're in flow. You're in the zone, right? Mm-hmm. And engagement and energy are a little bit different. Engagement means, am I involved? Am I working? And energy is, does it make me feel more alive, or does it make me feel more drained? It's not tired versus rested. It's aliveness. And those are slightly different, because I want to be engaged and I want to be alive, right? That's what I'm looking for. And I just jot that down. And preferably you do that for a couple of weeks, maybe even a month. There's an example in a book who's a real person, actually, I just saw recently. Many, many years ago, this young man was a civil engineer. He got a civil engineering degree and went to work for a small firm. As a matter of fact, interestingly, I mentioned, I talked to a guy who had this 9-year walk who lost his wife. That same guy is an architect and an engineer and ran a small engineering company. He actually ran the company that this young man worked for. Those two stories have nothing to do with each other, but they happen to be in an overlap. And so this young man is working for this small, civil engineering firm for about 1.5 years. and he's bored out of his mind. He just hates it. So he goes, oh, I guess I blew it. I don't like to do civil engineering. And his father-in-law was a stockbroker. And he said, well, you're really smart. You're really good at math. You should go into finance. Because finance is full of numbers, and you can make a lot of money, and you're a smart guy. Let's go. And this young man was that close to becoming a stockbroker, which would have been a nightmare, by the way. And so lots of, caring people run along and tell you what to do. So I said, look, before you go jumping out any windows, let's do the Good Time Journal and just write down what you do during the day and what works for you and what doesn't. Let's just get a record here, okay? And goes, okay, fine, And he does this for like a month. And we sit down again and we go through his notes, and guess what? He loves being a civil engineer. It's just that they don't let him do it very much. I mean, actual engineering problem solving, like taking data and crunching numbers and running problems, sitting in front of a screen using a simulator. He loves that stuff. He's actually a lot of people say, oh, please, I don't want a job where they make me sit by myself in an office and stare at a screen. He loves sitting by himself in an office and staring at a screen, as long as there are lots of numbers on it that have to do with this engineering class of problems. But he spent a lot of time in meetings and administration. It was a small firm, so everybody has to take care of the client and have client interface. And so all the business of being a civil engineer bored the tears out of him. Actually doing the work, heads down with your pencil and your sleeves rolled up, he loved doing. He just didn't do it anywhere near enough. And he hated the other stuff so much that the bad taste of it never went away. So it even made the good stuff taste lousy because he was not paying attention to it. So the first thing we did is say, look, for God's sake, just pay attention to when you're doing the fun stuff and enjoy it. And then let's take a look at what it might take for you to actually... So he actually realizes what he loves most are the hardest possible problems. So he stops out and goes and gets a PhD and ends up working in a very analytic company where they'll let him work on incredibly hard problems all day long, and he's happy as a clam. So it's a long story just to say the Good Time Journal is simply a way of finding out what you're actually good at and what actually works for you. And you really need to enter that process open-mindedly because you probably don't know yourself very well. You probably think you are the person that people tell you are. If he was listening to his father-in-law, he's really a stockbroker in hiding. He's not a stockbroker at all. That's just, most people tell you, hey, I bet you're just like me. No, you're not no, you're just like you. You got to go find out how you is.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Knowing how you're wired is so important, and
it's not easy to find. It's not automatic. It takes some work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a discovery process. The Good Time Journal actually, for me, looking back at not just what the weeks was good, but the lifetime of memories was really helpful. Yeah,
absolutely. There's a classic Harvard Business Review article now become one of their little booklets called Managing One's Self. And the lead article is by Peter Drucker, probably the most famous management consultant of all time. And one of his last articles, very late in his life, not that long before he died, was a little, essay on your responsibility as a worker in the world is to know yourself well, know what your skills are, know not only what you can do, but how you work well. Do you learn by reading? Do you learn by talking? Do you need to be alone? Do you need to work in groups? It's your moral responsibility to know yourself well enough that you can deliver your contribution to the world through the relationships you have in the institutions you're involved in. All of us have something to... Very few of us are working all by ourselves all the time and never interacting with anybody. You're part of something else. And so I would recommend your listeners go find Managing Oneself by Drucker, Drucker. It's a very complimentary article. And he would certainly say, oh yeah, the Good Time Journal is a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And do you recommend that people also ask for feedback? Because, you're talking about finding out yourself, but should that be an element of it to kind of get some self-awareness or no?
So clarify the question. What is it you're asking people to do?
Would you recommend that people ask other people, like, give me
get other people's opinion
about me? Yeah.
Sure. Well, this gets into how do you talk to people? Short answer is yes. Obviously, we've already said talk to lots of people. Now, asking people, what do you think I should do? Or what do you think I'm good at? You should ask people you've worked with, people you collaborate with. You want to get feedback. Well, hey, What do you think I do well? What do you think I do poorly? Where do you think I need to grow more? What worked for you? You want to get feedback for sure. That's going to be very important. And that can be very definitive. The other thing is, as you're talking to people, I make a distinction between advice and counsel. And I'm just looking to make up different words to get this distinction clear. Advice is when I tell you what I think. Well, you know, young man, if I were you, what I would do is, nah. Now, here's the thing. If very often people use that phrase, if I were you. But if I were you doesn't mean that. It means if you were me. And you're not me. Anybody looking at you, and no one's going to mistake caption red for Dave. I'm the 68-year-old white guy. You're not. So advice is when, this young man, the story I told a minute ago, his father-in-law was giving him advice. I think you should be a stockbroker. I'm telling you what to do. Now there's counsel, and counsel is someone who can help you figure out what you think. Advice is telling you what I think. Counsel is helping you find what you really think. So while you're talking to people, you got to be clear on whether or not people are giving you advice or counsel. And it's okay to get both. You just got to be careful about how you listen to them. You receive advice differently because most people's advice isn't about you, it's about them. And if they're not you, if they're not people whose values are like yours, their personality is different from yours, then, you take that input with a grain of salt and you don't necessarily obey it. But counsel, really, finding people who can really help you figure out your own ideas, those people are super valuable. You want a couple of those people in your life.
Absolutely. And that's part of the program, right?
Yep.
As far as what y'all do. So we are coming up on time. I would like quickly to talk about, I want to talk about both of the things.
I'll do the short version. We do two things quickly.
Yeah. Choosing happiness and failure immunity. You spent a whole chapter on both of them.
Okay.
Can you just explain both of those and, just why they're so important?
Let me start with failure immunity. The design world loves to talk about this, and frankly, we probably talk about it a little too much. I think we confuse some people. How do you become failure immune? And failure immunity, it's a clever term, and we cooked it up years ago in order to get people's attention. Hey, you should be failure immune. And people hear that like, I should never fail again as long as I live, or no failure I experience should ever matter to me. That's not what we mean. And that's an overstatement. So let me just start with that clarification. What we mean is, if you're going to be a prototyper and you're doing a design prototype to ask the interesting question, gee, what's it like to be a book author? As opposed to, boy, I sure hope this, version 132 of the Apple mouse really works because we're about to make 100,000 of them, Okay, that's a very different question. So when I'm prototyping to learn something, because I know that I don't know what I'm doing and I have to go try to find something out, well, it's probably not going to work. So mouse number 1 and mouse number 7 didn't work very well. And that was fine. We were just trying to learn how that thing could possibly work out. So we're learning our way forward. And as long as you learn something, you didn't fail. I mean, the fact that you didn't keep that mouse and make 100,000 of them, that's not the issue. Just did you learn anything? So as long as you've got the designed prototyping mindset of learning your way forward, you can't fail, right? The only way you could fail is you didn't learn anything because you weren't paying any attention. Now, that's what failure immunity is really about. So if you are a designer and you're building your way forward, every incremental step forward is a success, there are no failures. Because you don't want the prototype to succeed, you just want it to teach you. Okay, that's failure immunity. And it's a really good way to go while you're doing prototyping. Now, there are real failures. You can finally, when Bill and I did finally write the book and the final draft gets approved by the editor and they start printing the book, if nobody bought it, then the book failed. Okay, the book failed. That's a failure. Failure does exist, and we weren't immune to it. It would hurt. Right now, the second edition of our second book is on pre-sale, shipping October 19th, Designing Your New Work Life. Because Designing Your Work Life, our second book, was released on February 25th of 2020, 2 weeks before the shelter-in-place of COVID started. And COVID crushed the book. We got on the top 10 business book lists of, Forbes and Amazon. We're great critical acclaim. People, the reviewers thought the book was really brilliant. Nobody bought it because they're totally preoccupied with trying not to die from this damn COVID thing, Okay. So that book failed commercially. And so we've rewritten 4 new chapters all about life after the pandemic, and we're re-releasing the book as a vintage, paperback, and it's coming out right now. And we're going to give it another try. So, failure matters. When things don't really work at all, then you might need to go back and do them over. So that's failure. Now, pursuing happiness, the tagline of the first book is how to build the well-lived, joyful life. And we spent some time thinking about, what adjective in front of the word, and how to build the good life, the joyful, the right life, the perfect, the cool life. Which kind of life do you want to have? So, we spent some time on deciding that joyful would be an attribute that we thought a lot of people would want to live toward, and was accurate. Now, happy is a little different word. The positive psychology world goes after that. Most people, including scientists, agree pursuing happiness for its own sake doesn't work. Happiness is the byproduct of living the coherent life. I'm living life in a meaningful way to me. I'm making a contribution, or I'm living out my values. I decide what we call the coherent life, or who I am, what I believe in, and what I'm doing align. So I'm kind of making sense of myself in the world. That sense making is a prerequisite to happiness. It's very hard to be happy if your life doesn't make sense. So we start there. And then you lean into it. And then again, things like the Good Time Journal and paying attention, in fact, the title of the conclusion chapter is Permission to be Happy. And permission to be happy includes, look, you do have some agency over your life. You can make some of these design changes. We wrote the second book, by the way, called Designing Your Work Life, about a lot of little tiny small moves, practical moves you can make right where you already are. We say don't resign, redesign. Before you jump out the window and get a new job, more people quit in the last 3 months than in modern history. We're going through the great resignation or the big quit right now because people have had it. Well, some of those people probably should be doing exactly that. We got a chapter on how to quit. But also, a lot of people are probably quitting who could get a better job right where they are if they knew how to do that, by making small moves. And so, good enough for now is something we want to encourage people to allow themselves to be happy with. It's never going to be perfect. Okay. And I don't want you to, I'm not saying put up with crap, but I am saying, can you make it a little better? Here's some ideas for making it a little better. And if you made it a little better, is that good enough for now? Next month we'll try something else. So we on the happy thing, if you start getting your hands around the moves you can make. Some people listening to this are contemplating a really big dramatic move, completely changing their lives and moving across the country and getting a new degree and changing industries. And some are just like, I just like it to be a little bit better. And so we really do want to give people permission to be happy. None of us ever gets done, and none of us ever gets perfect. But am I growing proactively forward? And all our books are about are a couple of tools that might be helpful for you to make a couple of moves to make things a little better.
That's great. That's a great idea. You can't just haphazardly, jump without a parachute, right?
Right.
It's never smart. So that's great. Well, that's a great place to kind of end the interview. Mr. Evans, what I like to do at the end of my interview is I like to do a little freestyle rapping, talking about what we chatted about a little bit. So here we go. Let's see here. Can you hear that okay?
Yep.
All right. Yo, check. Words that I'm repping. Yo, it's Dave Evans. Came through and he's getting a whole bunch of people on their path, acting and coming through rapping. I'm talking about dysfunctional beliefs all the time. I keep it on the grind. That's what I gotta do. Yo, I'm just asking, what's my passion? You might have a lot, you might not have one, and that's what I say. You gotta just have fun. Good time journals, what you gotta write down, and that's what I say. You gotta do it right now. Understand you are just engaged. Come through. And yo, you gotta enjoy the things in your life. Be in a flow state, and that's what I say. Yo, I just make design thinking. You gotta prototype, you gotta try things and be curious. Look under the rock and do it non-stop. You got to understand, you got a whole bunch of questions you got to ask for the people that know that are in the situation you want to go. Basically what I'm saying is you got to understand how you got elements of your life. You got to create it just by trying. There's no failure. You just got to keep learning all the time. And that's how I rhyme, spit a freestyle. Yo, it's just amazing. Use your imagination and come straight through. Have an interview, maybe 2, maybe 50, maybe 75, and that's how you gon' come through and just arrive. I'm talking about Dave Evans is coming with a book, and it's really off the hook. Up on October 19th, we know it's about to drop, and that's how it goes. I spit a freestyle, and that's how I do. Come through, and we're here to make moves, spit off the top, and that's how I go. Designing your life up in the flow.
Oh man, you're killing me. That's great.
Very
impressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Cashman, thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Before we leave, I would like to direct people to wherever you want them to connect with you online.
Sure.
And whatever handles or a website or anything you want to share, please do.
Yeah, let me keep that simple for people. First of all, you can find our website, which is just the title of the first book with a dot in it. So it's Designing Your Life. With no, all small characters, no punctuation. So Designing Your Life is the home website. You can navigate from there to just about anything. A bunch of videos, a bunch of articles. You can sign up for our e-newsletter, and tens of thousands of people do that. Be glad to have you join us there. People often ask us the question, gee, can I take the class? And finally, the answer is yes, you can, actually. There's an online version of the core class at a place called Creative Live. So Creative Live, again, no punctuation, .com. Go to Creative Live and dial in Designing Your Life, and boom, there you are. In fact, it's one of the top classes on the website. It's a huge website, and it's really a cool deal because we were one of, if not the most expensive courses on their site for years, like $300 or $400. Mm-hmm. It's $29 right now.
Yes, I purchased
22 modules.
Yes.
And it's Bill and Dave teaching together with 18 people in 3 groups of 6. So people are wired up. It's a bona fide live interactive workshop, just the way we teach it if you were there in person. All the worksheets are downloadable. It's really well done. It's the deal of the century. It's barely the price of the book, And so, run, don't walk to get to creativelive.com, and you can get the live experience. So get the book, get the live experience. You're good to go.
Absolutely. And Designing Your Work Life, October 19th. People can pre-order it right now.
Yeah, so Designing Your Work Life is already out, but Designing Your New Work Life
right.
is the new book. And skip the first one if you haven't got it. Go right to the Designing Your New Work Life. So the old book plus 4 new chapters on disruption design. So we cooked up the idea that a disruption is an experience after which you find yourself saying, gosh, things are never going to be the same again. And you might have a personal disruption, a regional disruption, or even a global disruption. So Bill and I both had personal disruptions. My wife died, and both Bill's mother and his mother-in-law died. We'd lost a lot of women last year. And that's a personal disruption. Things are never the same again. Then we had a regional disruption here in Northern California. We damn near burned down again. My house was less than a mile from a fire line. I was that close to being evacuated because my house might burn down. Friends of mine's houses did burn to the ground. So that's a big regional disruption. Northern California is burning down. Then globally, we got this thing called COVID, which continues to go on in a just mind-numbing way. And so when you go through a disruption, that's the kind of change recovering from which takes a little extra effort. So we've got 4 chapters on how to understand disruptions and how to design your way through them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've put in my order. And also...
Great.
The original book, absolutely. I bought 9 copies for friends and family already. There's plenty more to come. I highly, highly recommend it. So
yeah, we've been, it's going on 6 years, 7 years now, and the thing just keeps selling like crazy. Frankly, it's incredibly humbling. We hear, like you, all these stories of people who were really helped by it and helped so much they gave it away, 5 times, 10 times, 30 times. And then we hear stories back from the people they gave the book to and the people they gave the book to. We have this line of stories. And, it is a great gift to us. We're very grateful for the chance we've been given, apparently, to be of some use to some people's lives. We don't we're not stars. We don't know anything you guys don't know, but it looks like we happened on some ideas and a way to say them in ways that people find helpful. So I'm glad it's been of use to you, and I certainly hope it's going to be of some use to your listeners.
Absolutely. All right. Sir, thank you so much for your time. I'm honored to have you on the podcast. The wood has been knocked on, and we're done.
We got through it, yeah. Well, thanks for your persistence in making this happen. Take care.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
All right, so that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot from it. And I hope you put what you learned into practice. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the follow button so you don't miss future episodes. And also, if you would please rate and review this podcast, that would be super helpful in getting the word out about it. All right, so that's all I got for now. Until next time, peace.